Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. His Twitter handle, @SJMuir. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Stewart, how important is forestry to Canada's economic health?
Well, it's a big driver of the economy. It produces all sorts of export products, from pulp and paper products to lumber that's greatly in demand in home building in the USA and other places. But there's also all kinds of niche products that you never even knew existed as a thing that Canada did. A quick example that comes to mind: a couple of years ago, I learned there's a sawmill in the interior of British Columbia. They make all of the wood components for the Sealy Posturepedic box springs. You know how they've got some wood frames that's really solid. It's going to last you decades or however long they promise. Well, that comes from one mill. Hollywood, when they build sets, they don't use the same 2x4s that you build your house with, because your house is supposed to last 100 years and, survive a hurricane. A Hollywood set, flimsy. So they have a special dimensional type of lumber. And again, that's manufactured at a sawmill in BC. That's where Hollywood goes to get that stuff. All kinds of other things, from Shinto temples in Japan, where they'll send monks out. They'll fly them out to Vancouver from Tokyo, and they will go and walk in the woods, and they will look at the trees that the forest company is proposing. They'll say, that one, not that one. We'll take that one, not that one. And they will see the spirituality that they perceive in these trees, so as to ensure that they are appropriate to put in their holy place. I mean, those are just a few examples. And the more people I get to talk to and meet in forestry in BC and Canada, the more I hear these amazing stories. And here's one theme. I mean, you're often hearing, someone's against forestry, or they say that it's environmentally damaging and so on. And definitely, the wrong practices can damage forestry. But even Greenpeace, which generally opposes any sort of resource activity of any kind, they've said about BC that it is the foremost best forest jurisdiction in the world in terms of its practices. They're on the record saying that. I know it's hard to believe, but they are. And, why is that? Well, because we have laws and regulations that in our democratic system have come forward. And you can't go and log in a place, for example. You can't do a harvest if there are endangered species, if the First Nations that are in the area haven't been consulted in part of it. And usually these days, First Nations are actually involved in the business. So that's modern forestry, and that's why I think Canadians can be really quite proud of it.
And something people probably aren't aware of either is that Saskatchewan is one of the world's major producers of chopsticks.
That's amazing. So, there they are, quietly producing not only chopsticks, but they produce all kinds of pulses. They are at the cutting edge of research into food proteins. They've invented some things that are behind these new burgers, the meatless burgers. It's because of what was done by Saskatchewan innovators. And they also provide uranium so that people can have clean, renewable power, which is, pretty good for one little Canadian province. Well, big on the map, but pretty small population to do all that.
Yes, Saskatoon now has an office where they're going to be producing rare earths as well.
Yeah, well, as we look at the demands of the future for electrification of energy systems, you can't do that without having critical minerals, including these rare earths. I mean, everyone who's listening probably has a cell phone. If you don't, maybe you're in jail or something. Then you probably have an old-fashioned cell phone. But you've all got cell phones. If you swipe your screen across, your finger across the screen, stuff happens. Why does it happen? Because there are rare earths in that screen. Everyone uses rare earths every day. But right now China controls the flow of that. And if you look at trade relations with China, not in a good place. So do we want everything in our lives to be subject to one country's control? No, I don't think so. And Canada has got enormous potential, including Saskatchewan, the north, other parts of the country.
Well, China has been putting out some pretty mean messages about Canada, calling our prime minister a boy who doesn't know anything, and who is Canada to tell China about human rights, because according to China, a third of the children who went to residential schools died. It was bad, but that would be worse than what happened in the Russian Gulag.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm just reading the new history of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and they would say, well, we're going to send you off for a struggle session because, you're saying things that are incorrect. And off they would go. And sometimes that struggle session would be a life-threatening event. No joke. I mean, it's a gargantuan-sized population with a long history of being in an imperial country, and it's still ruled in lots of ways just as it was for thousands of years. You've got one person at the top, and nowadays it's not the princes and dukes. It's the Communist Party that allows the power to flow down from the top. But it's an astonishing country in terms of what it supplies to us, and also, let's be honest, Canada has trade relationships with China that are very, very important. And if we suddenly didn't have those, not only would we find it difficult to go about daily life, because look at all the things that are made in China, but also our economy is very reliant. So when we have a couple of Canadians in the conditions they're being held in, when we have this diplomacy, I mean, I'm pretty sympathetic to the nuance of this for the federal government. It's difficult. We need smart people who understand the situation to be negotiating through this. And hopefully by what we do, we can be part of China, finding a way to treat its people more humanely and not feel they have to essentially remove all of their culture and languages, as is happening in parts of the country. But it's diplomacy. It's complicated stuff.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Stewart, Resource Works has done some important work when it comes to what Canadians feel about the development of natural resources, and what has your research found? Well,
just over the longer term, for the last 8 years, we've been regularly doing public opinion polls and publishing them because we think it's important. Especially now, urban areas are becoming very powerful, appropriately so, but they're being disconnected from the natural resource sector. I was just looking back at testimony made a few days ago by the renowned natural resource scholar Ken Coates, also from Saskatchewan, by the way. He was virtually in front of parliamentarians in Ottawa on this issue, and we have a lot of opportunities and advantages in Canada right now, because there is a scale and intensity of global mineral demand that is, mind-boggling. Even though we are seeing some economic recession right now, the long-term trends are clearly towards more use of these things. And yet in Canada, we're limiting ourselves. We have regulations, we have development times that are not conducive to investment finding its way to letting us supply these things. Things are too slow. And others do it instead elsewhere in the world and get the benefits. Maybe don't do it as well. So, one of the things we've done, Jim, is we've commissioned a poll. We're releasing it, and it shows that 4 out of 5 Canadians believe that natural resource development is good for Canada. 81% of Canadians. That's a really good number. Jim, I would say that, the indication here is that, the vast majority of Canadians do see and sense how the things that they see around them, whether it's on the railroads or the ships in the port or, maybe their nephew, cousin, back neighbor, maybe the thing they do for a living is connected to the resource economy. So I think despite sometimes the political confusion and the messages we hear from on high, the average person here does get it. And that's a good thing.
Well, I've seen two studies now that say the one country in the world that will get the most benefit from climate change is Canada, because it will, if glaciers and ice and snow roll back or they're not there as often over the year, it will reveal new natural resources that this country could sell to the rest of the world, because, as you said, the rest of the world is so demanding. Most of the Canadian population lives within 100 miles of, or 160 clicks of the U.S. border. So we have a lot of territory where there's nobody, literally. And who's it going to disturb if these certain resources are developed?
Yeah, well, there's going to be someone out there, waiting to hear us say climate change is great for Canada. But I think really what we're saying here is we're just observing that natural phenomena that are propelled by humanity's activities are creating changes to the landscape, and it's a verifiable fact. What you say there. Another observation made actually by the International Panel on Climate Change several years ago. I don't know if it's been in the latest reports, but I do remember reading in the IPCC report, which is the driving source of all of the climate action that you hear about. This report observed that Canada was one of those countries that, because of changes to climate, will become way, way more productive and abundant in agricultural terms. So, again, I would underline that this is not me saying, yay, climate change. It's just a phenomenon that will attend climate change. And it does mean that in future, whatever it brings, there are some opportunities there to make sure that Canada is able to be part of a global trend towards providing for people for the needs they have, and do so in a responsible, sustainable way.
TD, Toronto Dominion Bank, did a study, and they say up to 450,000 jobs would be lost in Canada if the country went to a low-carbon economy. What's your feeling on that?
My feeling when I saw that study was that the authors of that report could do a little more research to find out what's going on with how energy systems are transforming. I was noting a picture the other day. There is a manufacturer in France who has realized there's a market for electric car owners who are maybe going camping or going on long trips to have an alternative fuel source to just their electric car. What if they can't charge it? So they've developed a little trailer. It hooks onto your little mini French car. They love their small cars over there. They can be quite luxurious, but tiny. And you take your little tiny electric car and you hook a trailer on the back. That trailer has a gas-powered generator in it. Maybe it's diesel, but it's a fossil fuel-powered generator on wheels. It looks like a little mini camper van or camper trailer, and you just bring it with you on your trip so that you don't have the disappointment of running out of fuel for your car. So that's not really, I don't think, what the developers of electric vehicles had in mind when they developed the product. Nevertheless, it's what the market is providing to people. The thing takes 35 liters of fuel, and it'll make sure that your electric car is not going to run out. You keep it plugged in while you drive. Now, I don't know if that's an April Fool's joke or not. I'm assured that it's real. There's such a product. It kind of makes sense. I've seen things like that before, actually. My point, though, is not to disparage electric vehicles, because I think they're wonderful. It's to point out that the future isn't necessarily what someone says it needs to be. When someone said everyone needs to have an electric car, maybe they didn't think, well, some of them could be towing around gasoline generators while they have those electric cars.
So you've made yourself your own hybrid car.
Well, sure, exactly. That's what you've done. But I think bigger picture is that it points to not so much transition. This energy transition. This is the mantra. We've got to transition off this, transition to that. The future is not going to be so simple and clear cut, which, TD has clearly, drank the bathwater on this idea that if an advocate for certain kinds of renewable energy has said the future will be this, well, that's how the future will be. Well, that's not what I see. I think humanity will respond differently to the stimulus of needing to decarbonize in all kinds of ways. I think we'll be driving gasoline cars in 50 years, but those gasoline cars will not be emitting CO2 because they'll be captured. CO2 will be captured in the car, or maybe it will be minimized at the point of production.
I have experienced the European small car and camper trailer phenomena, having been stuck in a 500-kilometer long traffic jam in the middle of July because their little cars overheated in the Alps trying to haul those trailers around. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's nothing like a French traffic jam in August as the entire country gets on La Péage to get down to the Côte d'Azur. That's a great place to be, but getting there is hell. And France loves to talk about how it's such a clean country and all this, and those horrible Yanks and Canadians, but actually they're pretty good at burning up things in order to enjoy the finer things in life, which they're also good at enjoying. I think the transformation of energy systems will be much more nuanced. I think that it could be that there's unemployment for sure in some areas, and the new employment will be in areas like carbon capture, which will allow for us to have the reliable, affordable energy that we currently have, but without the negatives. I mean, that's one thing. I don't understand why the bankers aren't talking about this more. They should be. They should be realizing what's going on in the West. I mean, the West is like a foreign country to Toronto, to Bay Street, sometimes, I think. And if they actually came out to Alberta, came out to BC, Saskatchewan, saw what was going on, they'd go back saying, you guys, you got to check out what's happening in our own country that we are not paying attention to. Because you've got innovation in hydrogen, in as I say, the carbon capture areas, reduction of the upstream emissions in oil sands. I mean, there's all these old sort of myths and epithets about Canadian oil sands. Certainly, there's true, environmental challenges. There really are. Can't be denied. Wouldn't attempt to. But what is overlooked in this is the improvements that are being made, and this is why I think the transformation is that's upon us. I mean, I was looking recently at what's going on with the shippers who are going to be putting their oil into the Trans Mountain expansion to Burnaby. What's happening there? Well, you look at a few of them. There's about a dozen companies, Jim. One of them is BP, used to be known as British Petroleum. They love to talk about how they're decarbonizing. Well, actually, they're enthusiastically embracing the opportunity to take their SAGD operations, their steam-assisted gravity drainage in the oil sands where they have investments, and putting that into the new TMX line. You look at companies like Meg Energy. They've just recently been talking about how their SAGD oil sands products are part of this much greener future for heavy oil. What's happening, they say, in their most recent investor statement, is that there's significant new refinery capacity in China and India. They call them complex refineries. They need heavy oil. They replaced the simple refineries that used to exist or still exist but are being phased out. And if you look at where's this going to come from, there's an enormous opportunity for Canada, but we could only exercise it if we get that oil to market. Another one of the myths is that all the oil that will be produced over the next 40 years from the oil sands is going to be combusted in a way that is deleterious to the environment. And I think this is where there needs to be a lot more attention to the innovation that's happening. Look at Suncor. I mean, here's a company, it's a Canadian company, Calgary-based. It often gets knocks. You hear it being criticized for this reason or that reason, even in our own country by politicians who are able to have the spending plans they have because of companies like Suncor supplying the revenues. But if you look at what they're actually doing, last week, the Bloomberg Climate Transition Score was issued. Bloomberg is a news agency and financial information firm that is often thought to be very green in its outlook. They've invested more than Reuters or Dow Jones or the other agencies in, shifting its coverage to really favor climate-friendly companies and policies. So they took the top 10 list of oil companies that are they say, prepared for a low-carbon world. Top 10 list from Bloomberg included Suncor, and the 9 other countries were all from Europe. So you might think from that, in Canada, would start to realize, wait a minute, we're globally recognized by Bloomberg as a country that's going in the right direction on this stuff. That realization isn't quite there yet, but I'm happy to be one of the ones at the cutting edge talking about it, because if we don't, connect the dots and realize that transformation is much, much more about shifting to the preferred solutions of vested interest groups that are seeking to profit based on our naive views about transition, the sooner we can correct and enhance our understanding, the sooner we can stop 500,000 Canadians from being unemployed.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, the week prior to April 1st, Volkswagen put out a news release and had a lot of publicity about how they're going to call one of their new electric vehicles the Volkswagen. And then a few days later, they told us, that was an April Fool's joke. Well, it was nowhere near April's 1st. So, first of all, they didn't get the concept of what April Fool's is. And that's only supposed to be a half-day joke. You tell it in the morning, and then at noon you tell people, we were just kidding. They have a credibility problem. They were fined $45 billion for lying about their diesel emissions. One of their executives has been sentenced to 7 years in jail for perpetrating that diesel emission lie. And yet here they are lying about electric vehicles. Does Volkswagen not understand how jokes work and how this has actually made them a joke?
Well, yes. I mean, maybe the executive thought he was only following orders. I mean, that is to say the huge number of orders that Tesla has on its books and seeking to get in there. I don't know, Jim, but I think that they have a little more work to do to repair the credibility since the diesel scandal.
Well, Volkswagen is the world's largest car maker, so obviously they don't care if they have to pay, I guess, a $45 billion fine because their profits. But they did take a big hit, and people are now a little wary of Volkswagen products because they may not feel that they're getting what they've been promised by the manufacturer. Is this a problem for them? And is this a lesson other companies have to learn? When you lie to the public, it can burn you for a long time.
Well, I think let's let them off the hook a little bit. I mean, that's a true statement. Totally agree, Jim. It does speak to the earnestness and strong desire of everyone to get into what's happening with electric vehicles and be part of that story. And you're seeing, there was a forest company in BC talking about how one day, not too far, they hope they'll have a Tesla truck that does some of their industrial work, industrial haulage. I don't know if that's short distance around the yard or longer distances or what, but they're excited about it. You've got every major automotive company in the world that's definitely not so much getting on the bandwagon. They're already into this stuff, but they're ramping it up. And you've got governments that are legislating it. So I think Volkswagen got a little overexcited. Maybe its PR people said, okay, here's an idea. What do you think? And they said, that sounds, good. But not so good in the end because they got lambasted not just by Jim Goddard, but I mean, they were heaped with scorn on that one. But, it's a case of their hearts being in the right place.
Aboriginal involvement in natural resource development. I know that you've taken part in conferences and sponsored several. Do we have any more First Nations business conferences or events coming up?
Well, I'm actually working on one right now because at ResourceWorks we're going to be doing the Indigenous Partnerships Success Showcase. There's a website for it. Tickets are now on sale, ipss2021.com, to find out more about it. We have a lineup of international and Canadian thought leaders in this whole question of how are economic opportunities becoming available to Indigenous people, especially in Canada, that will allow them to pursue the things they want to pursue. I mean, there was a time where there was some bureaucrat in Ottawa who would decide, what Indigenous people wanted and should have, and boy, did that ever mess things up. They got things they didn't want that created generations of social chaos and injustice. And now we're coming into a time when, someone coming along saying, hey, here's a solution for you, you should do this. Today, what we've seen is a shift. The First Nations who want to be traditional in their ways can do that if they choose. First Nations who want to be engaged in the economy can do that the way they choose. And I think all the smart companies and governments are realizing this and saying, okay, you tell us what you see, what you want, what future you're envisioning, and then if you want us to work together to collaborate on how we get there, let's do that. And, I think that's a non-judgmental way, an unselfish way, and really the only true way to go about solving the inequities that Indigenous people in the Americas have suffered for half a millennium. And it's unfolding here, more so in British Columbia than elsewhere, not because BC's different or better, so much as, in fact, there's 1/3 of all the First Nations in Canada, Indigenous groups, are in BC. There's 200 plus First Nations in British Columbia. And I always think that's because of the rugged geography, and, you could be tucked away in the back of a mountain pass and be there for eons and have your distinct culture, and that's why that's one First Nation, whereas maybe not so much in some of the broader flat expanses elsewhere in the country. That's my theory, Jim. But at any rate, we have seen so much innovation in terms of First Nations in BC that have been signing treaties and doing business deals, whether it's in aquaculture or forestry, mining, in pipelines. I mean, the amount of innovation in that, but also in tourism, in manufacturing. It's really neat stuff that's happening. But I noticed a couple of years ago that, this wasn't really being talked about very much. And at the same time, we've got new legislation come into place in BC, and there's a new law coming into place for Canada, UNDRIP, broadly, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And this legislation is going to change how governments have to go about things, and that's a positive for everyone in Canada. And it needs to be, I think, understood better. So that's a big part of what we're doing. How does the future of business and relationships and shared prosperity, how does it correlate to alignment to changing legislation and going in the direction that, ultimately treats everyone with the dignity that they deserve?
Stewart, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.